Donald Trump blocked from Maine presidential ballot in 2024. So this is the developing story of trying to disqualify presidential candidates, which is a horrible precedent to set. It's very fucking bad that this is happening. Both sides are doing it. The Republicans, granted, are doing it purely in retaliation as a principled stance. They don't want to have to do it, it seems like, from their own statements. Democrats, on the other hand, do. They want to get rid of Trump. Now, Colorado tried this. It's not in effect currently because it's being appealed. So I don't think that will hold. I don't think any of these will hold, frankly. But Maine are now trying it too, and plenty of other Democrat states are probably going to do the same thing. With this one, though, there's a little bit more to it, because apparently the woman who has run this, who's sort of initiated it here, who looks like Belana Torres without the, forehead makeup, but with still the hair pulled back to make her Klingon. Head clits, indeed. This woman who did it apparently has gone off the reservation to do so and might be impeached, which will be fun. This woman, I haven't heard her talking yet, but she's apparently nuts. So let's listen to her. This is the sort of the woman behind this thing to get rid of Trump.
I'm mindful that no Secretary of State has ever deprived a presidential candidate of ballot access based on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. But I'm also mindful that no presidential candidate has ever before engaged in insurrection. The events of January 6th were tragic and unprecedented, and the evidence presented in the hearing before me that I was duty-bound to rule upon indicated that January 6, 2021 was in fact an insurrection. And
that is insanity.
Bro, he literally made a tweet saying for people to like not do, like, how can this happen? It's pure. These people from January 6th are literal like political prisoners. They're still in jail. Yeah. Most people don't even know where they are, what's happened to them. Like, this is crazy what they're attempting to do here.
Yep. Spooner, I'm not sure that they would need a conviction to do this. It's a constitutional thing. Every state should take it upon themselves to try and make sure the Constitution is being upheld. But they're just wrong. There is no sane world in which Jan 6th was an insurrection by Trump. If anything, it was a retaliation to an insurrection by the Democrats, which is still in effect. Because they rigged the election.
Mr. Trump did in fact engage in that insurrection. Under Maine law, if a candidate qualifies for the ballot, any registered Maine voter may bring what's called a Section 336 challenge. And that's what happened here in the state. I qualified Trump for the ballot, and there were 3 challenges brought by citizens of Maine, in a couple of cases, 2 former Republican state senators and a former Democratic state senator.
Traitors to the nation, essentially.
Once a challenger brings a challenge, I am required to hold that hearing within 5 days, and then issue that decision within a compressed deadline.
Okay.
I was not allowed under Maine law to wait for the United States Supreme Court.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if that sounds like bollocks, but the problem with all this, even if we assume that these people are doing everything procedurally by the book, it is insane to assert that Jan 6th was an insurrection by Trump. That is indefensible.
They've been trying to get him in jail for so long now. This is just another way of doing it, or like trying to. They're terrified because they know most people are going to be voting for Trump, and I really do think they will.
Yep.
Even there's a lot of Black voters that are more inclined to be be voting for him this year
Hispanic
as well.
Too. Yeah.
Yeah, like they're terrified, and that's why they're doing absolutely everything they can.
Nice profile picture there.
Yes, indeed.
So, yeah, Kaiser Hall, it's exactly what you're saying. Imagine a precedent wherein all Republican and Democrat presidential candidates automatically being disqualified because the opposing party claims they committed crimes. Yeah, like the line I've said on this before, which I'll say again because I think it still applies, is you've heard the term constitutional crisis thrown around. This is a new tier of constitutional crisis not before seen in like hundreds of years. This would be the greatest relinquishment of the democratic process in the US in a very long time. I said before that there is still hope for the US, even with that rigged election, because the next one might not be rigged. It may be possible to overcome it, maybe. But if they do this, if this stands in the Supreme Court, if any state manages to keep Trump off the ballot, fucking, I don't know. I don't know if it's recoverable. I don't know what you can do about that. At that point, there may not be a peaceful resolution.
If they do manage to get this through, then like I don't know, I don't think you could ever claim that your system isn't corrupt, or like there's no, like it's just broken at that point, and they've taken full control of it. And I don't know, there's only at that point, like there isn't really much you can do other than turn like to violence when you have a government that is using underhanded means and going against your whole process in this way. Like I don't see how else you would.
Yeah, I believe that under classical liberal ideology, classical liberal principles, you are not just permitted but obligated to engage in violent actions when your basic rights, especially your democratic rights, have been taken away. When there is no peaceful recourse, you are not just permitted but obligated to engage in violence to resolve it. In Minecraft, do not crime. Anyway, this is a picture of her with Joe Biden, which, you know, sussy. And this person says, for every 1,000 likes, I'll make her forehead even bigger. This post has 7.8 thousand likes. It is a video of her talking to someone, which I have seen the video posted, but I have not watched the video yet. So apparently this is insane.
Again, I am so mindful, and I said this in my decision, that it is unprecedented. No Secretary of State has ever deprived a presidential candidate of ballot access based on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. But no presidential candidate has ever engaged in insurrection and been disqualified under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment.
Well, you disqualified him. You decided that. Oh, God. Jesus Christ. I wasn't expecting that. That's a Photoshop job. By someone who doesn't like her very much. I was eating, for fuck's sake, says Keith. Yeah, that's Jesus, it's getting worse.
Oh my God.
For fuck's sake. This is horrendous. Anyway, so that's that woman. Now, as to whether that was a valid thing to do or not, go away. Maine Secretary of State who opted to keep Trump off primary ballot is facing threat of impeachment. So this is ground.news. It's a good sort of news aggregator. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. So let's see if we can find a source on this, which will give us the story of the headline here. So legal expert predicts lose court battle to keep Trump off top. That seems sensible. Don't impeachment. Boston Globe leans left, apparently, according to these guys. Have a look. Maine Secretary of State who wants to keep Trump off primary ballot is facing threat of impeachment. Maine's top election official could face an impeachment attempt in the state legislature over her decision to keep former President Donald Trump off the primary ballot. Maine's top election official could face an impeachment attempt on the state legislature, At least one Republican lawmaker has vowed to pursue impeachment against Democratic Secretary of State Shenna Bellows, despite long odds in the Democratic-controlled legislature. So yeah, it may hold unless the Supreme Court does something about it. So this is once again being taken to the Supreme Court, and just like in 2020, we were pretty sure, or we were relatively confident that they would do something about it because they're supposed to. If they're for anything, it's for resolving an issue across multiple states, a legal issue across multiple states. But they didn't. They cucked out. They were cowards. And in this case, obviously they should say this is wrong, but will they? Or will they be cowards once again? If they relinquish their duty, if they don't do something about this, it very well could be the end of the US democracy. Like the whole idea of the 250-year republic thing, up until this series of events, I'd always kind of, had my doubts about the validity of that. But if they go ahead and don't stand up to this, no, I'm pretty sure the 250 years thing is prophetic, and that will be, a really good chance that'll be the end of the Republic if that happens. Because, the thing is, if the Republicans were in that case likely to just back down and cuck, then it wouldn't be. But it would still be obviously a horrendous injustice, but it would still not be the end of the Republic. But I don't think the Republicans are willing to. They're fucking base certainly aren't willing to just back down on that one. That might lead directly to violence. Massive scale violence. This, like assassinating Trump, could be the spark that sets off an actual hot civil war. They really are tempting fate with this shit. This is really unwise on their part. They would suffer less by letting Trump be president for 4 years than the wrath of the people if they actually pull this off, if they actually get Trump disqualified.
I assume they're banking on people not doing anything like they usually don't do. And January 6th is one of the many reasons they're like, look, guys, you dare do anything against us, this is what will happen, just like January 6th. Look, your president isn't even, we're not letting him go on the ballot. We've imprisoned you. We've done this. Keep trying to do this and we'll do the same every time. And they've gotten away with it. They're still imprisoned. Yep. I think they fully believe that they can get away with this.
Maybe they do. I think their time on that is limited. They've been tempting fate for years, and eventually it's going to snap.
Oh yeah, people can only take so much, and I think that eventually it will happen.
I really think that there is potential in this conflict for us to win purely through peaceful, principled actions. We already have the public on our side sufficiently. But if they do this, it might be impossible at that point.
If they literally start to demonize all of Texas and like what they were doing before, where with Biden trying to claim that if Texas puts them on the ballot, they won't recognize it or something, I feel like that might actually result in some massive things happening in America. We have to rely on Texas once again to step up. But it's needed, I think.
Last time we checked, there were 16 states that were trying to get rid of Trump from the ballot. The story here is not that there's now 2 that are trying, it's that there's 2 that have ruled in their state that he is off the ballot. Now, the federal Supreme Court has a say on that, so it's not final, but it's not far off being final. And if the Supreme Court doesn't do it, and there's also one other level of court between the 2 as well, but if none of the higher courts rule that this is wrong and can't go ahead, then this is pretty much the end of the democratic process in the US. Even a rigged election can be weathered. You can take 1 or 2 of those, even at the highest level, but evicting a candidate, the most popular candidate in history, evicting him from the process arbitrarily for a reason this bad as well, that cannot be sustained.
Sounds like communism to me. Sounds like corruption to the core of the system to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
something like at this, if this goes through, like something massive has to change because the
Yeah,
system is just purely broken, and
yeah,
it'll be very obvious at this. And each time going forward from then on, you can never trust the well, you can't even now trust the election
indeed.
process. But if this goes through, there's no hope with it at all. Like change will be necessary.
Mm,
It's already necessary, but like I think
yeah.
this would be the nail in the coffin.
I mean, if you do genuinely take away people's ability to solve this problem peacefully, they will just solve it by other means.
And I mean, out of everyone to do it, America does have a
Yeah.
lot of its citizens armed compared to the rest of the world.
The Democrats are probably, like, in an abstract sense, terrified. They don't think it's going to happen, but abstractly terrified of the notion of Republicans genuinely taking up arms and killing their local Democrat politicians. Not an advocacy, by the way. Do
I
not
don't know
grind.
how it hasn't happened yet.
But look, this could do it. This kind of shit, if this stands, could just do it. And I think that they have this fear in the back of their minds, but they are constantly thinking, they'll never do it. We can get away with it. But no, at some point you won't be able to anymore. At some point it will just snap. If you take away their ability to solve this peacefully, they will just take another approach eventually.
I mean, have you seen what the French have started doing, which is just burning their politicians' houses and stuff? Like, I'm surprised that hasn't become more widespread throughout other countries at this point. But again, France is always on fire, so maybe that's not a good example. But I mean, you know what I mean? Like, the politicians have gotten to the point where they're so brazen about what they're doing. And I feel like back in the day, they would be a bit more careful with these kind of things because, oh no, a bullet's going to go through my skull. But they've gotten more, I don't know, they think they're untouchable in this day and age.
So, Field says the right to run for presidency is outlined in the Constitution, and this is a deprivation of Trump's rights without charge or trial. It is blatantly unconstitutional. The Supreme Court, I really hope, sees it that way, because I expect you're completely right. And then Achilles says something I do think is interesting I want to comment on. He says, what do you think about the theory that the regime will let Trump win to restore confidence in the system and placate dissidents, whilst just making sure he can't be very effective against them during his term? There's lots to unpack there. Firstly, is that them letting him win is not their style. They are nowhere near that. I don't think they could contain that everything we've seen up until now is they want to just get rid of him. They want to make him go away using methods that appear legitimate. And that's the point, is that they are relying very much on the appearance of legitimacy. If a president like Trump gets into power, they can genuinely make a lot of differences. They can genuinely change a lot because they have that legitimacy. The Democrats don't want to remove the assumptions of legitimacy. They want to subvert them. They want to own them. They want to have that power because that power exists. The assumption of legitimacy, the assumption of legislative power and the right to make laws exists. They don't want to get rid of that. They want to own it. And so if someone else who is not friendly to them enters into that arena, they do have that power, genuinely. They can do things with it. Now, Trump in 2016 was a fresh-faced young entrant to politics who believed that the problems were mostly stupidity and bad management and a few corrupt people here and there. I think now he realizes that it's just fucking corruption everywhere. That people need to be told no on a large scale directly. And I think if he gets into office now, I don't like this necessarily because it is dictatorial, but I think he may use executive orders a lot more liberally. Rather than doing it properly, rather than going through the legislature, going through the House, I think he now realizes that even if you assume that they're all corrupt, either way, there's so many of them that are probably rigged into that position. The whole thing's illegitimate anyway. So he might just force things through, which he has the power to do through executive orders. I think the Democrats were terrified of what he was doing during his original term. They are much more terrified of what he'll do this time.
And he didn't even use, like, compared to the other presidents, like, he didn't even use those powers as much as they did. Like, from what I remember seeing, like, he used those kind of the thing you mentioned there. Like
Executive orders.
executive orders. From what I remember, like I could be wrong here, Chad. But from what I remember is seeing that he had used them less than all other presidents before him. Maybe not
I'm not
the
sure on that
least
one.
out of them, but he had used a lot less in that presidency compared to the previous ones.
I don't remember the numbers
But
on that.
to the point, yeah. But this is what I'm saying. Like somebody can fact check me on that.
Yeah.
But to what you were saying before, with him getting it in, or like them trying to give legitimacy back to the establishment and thing, I think they're more relying on just gaslighting most of the population into thinking that the system still works while putting their own little puppet in place. They would rather have their own puppet, like another Biden, in there than ever let Trump win. Because he can actually do something. They can try and stop him every way they can, but he is still the president in that sense, and he can do things that they would not want him to do.
Yes.
He's not easily as controlled. He's not as a puppet. He's not the puppet that they want. So that's why I don't think they would let him in, personally.
Yes.
They'd let him in and then maybe fucking assassinate him. Maybe. But I don't think that would make them look any better either.
No. To word my position a little differently, they have not tried to remove the power from these positions of power. They've just tried to remove the access for their enemies to these positions of power. So the power is still there. Yeah, exactly, because they want the power. The power is still there. This is why I say that even though in the grand hierarchy of the evil powers of the world, the politicians are not at the top. They are run by NGOs and fucking or billionaires and all kinds of other people above that level. But they could be at the top if they wanted to be. The reason that the politicians are not at the top is because they allow themselves to be corrupt by those groups. If you get a politician into a position of power in, for example, the US, they can just say no to the corrupt practices and then they're at the top of the pecking order. They can make the decisions. And all you need to do is get people into positions of power who are motivated to do that. And you break that entire fetid hierarchy of the globalists and the cathedral, it's often called. You just break that straight away because their access depends upon that assumed power. By the way, that's part of the reason the election was riggable, is because the press just went along with it. The press are perceived as being the arbiters of what has happened. And so that's why they have that power. Our enemies, again, they didn't try to remove the power from where it was installed. They just tried to own those positions. So they still have power. So if you just clear them out, replace the people in there, which we're doing in the political arena already, then you win. And this is why the idea that they would let Trump win to try and restore faith in this, no, they're not that smart. And if Trump won, they wouldn't be able to contain him. They don't want to restore faith in the system, I don't think. I don't think they're thinking that far ahead. I think, as someone else said just now, their hatred of Trump, that narrative, the amping up, the equivalent of Goldstein in 1984, the Minute of Hate or whatever it is, that shit, they've amped that up too much. They can't back down from it now. In order to keep the portion of people that they are using as foot soldiers, ideological foot soldiers, on their side, they have to keep intensifying. That's the only way they know how to appeal to anyone at the moment. And so they have internally no choice but to continue going harder and harder. Trump winning could just be their undoing. It's why they've been this desperate. I mean, you saw how desperate they were 4 years ago when they rigged the election in plain view, pretty much. It's 4 years since then, and now the specter of Trump still becoming president is looming ever wider on the horizon. Back in 2020, they thought they'd got him with Jan 6th. 4 years later, he is 55 points ahead of every other Republican candidate. And obviously the favorite to win. They haven't got rid of him. I think they're so fucking desperate, they are not thinking any more than a few months ahead of their noses. Don't be fooled by the veneer of power they express. That is their strategy. They are, I think, headless chickens behind the scenes, and they are not in a safe position right now.